Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Today, we're diving deep into the heart of Texas, where the land is as wide as its legends and just as terrifying. From haunted new homes with whispers in the walls to sinister shadows lurking in empty rooms, get ready for 20 disturbing true Texas new home horror stories that will make you question what's real and what's hiding just beyond your doorstep. But before we begin, here's a warning. Most viewers make one huge mistake: they leave without subscribing. By doing that, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-chilling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the start, and the terror waiting in those new homes is far from over. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Drop it in the comments below, because here, the night is just beginning, and the horror is about to unfold. Now, let's step inside, into the darkest corners of Texas' newest homes, where fear waits patiently behind every door. Mallory Lentz hadn't expected to move again so soon. Not after the divorce. Not after the lease she broke in Houston just to get away from the constant sirens, her ex-husband's voicemails, and that strange man who always stood at the bus stop without ever boarding a bus. So when the house popped up on the listing site, a 3-bed, 2-bath in Kessler Park, priced nearly $30,000 below the market, she messaged the agent immediately. Karen was waiting in the driveway when she arrived. Blonde bob, wrinkle-free linen blazer, teeth too perfect to be anything but fake. Mallory stepped out of her car and immediately noticed how quiet it was. Not calm quiet, not peaceful quiet, dead quiet. No birds, no kids, no leaf blowers. Just wind brushing across the eaves and somewhere, distantly, the ticking of a metal wind chime without any chimes. It's a deal, Karen had said before the tour even began, like she already knew how it would end. You'll love the floors, original pine, and the kitchen. Oh honey, the backsplash alone is to die for. Mallory followed her from room to room. The floors were beautiful. The walls smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil, freshly cleaned. The bathroom tiles were uncracked, the water pressure sharp, and the hallway closets even had their original crystal knobs. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was somewhere she could breathe. She didn't ask about the attic, but Karen mentioned it anyway as they stood in the hallway near a square patch in the ceiling with a dangling cord. Oh, and just ignore the attic, she said lightly, flipping her binder closed. Nothing up there. Builder left it unfinished. You'll never need it, Mallory had blinked. Is there storage? Sure, if you like fiberglass dust and dead squirrels. Really, trust me, you won't want to bother. That was that. Papers. Signed, keys handed over. By sunset, she was unpacking the boxes her sister had helped her tape shoot 2 towns ago. The first 3 nights were uneventful, which was a victory in itself. Her bed was in place. Her favorite lamp cast its orange glow just right against the bookshelves. The fridge purred quietly. Even the old dog she'd adopted during her divorce, a droopy-eared mutt named Darcy, seemed content. Then came night 4. Mallory was asleep when it happened. Deep under the covers, Darcy curled behind her knees. At 3:09 a.m. exactly, she heard a thud. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't urgent, just deliberate, like something heavy had dropped on the attic floor directly above her bed. Her eyes snapped open in the dark, the kind of open that makes you hold your breath and strain your ears like you're trying to see with them. Nothing followed. No scraping. No footsteps. Just that single sound, thick and final. She told herself it was the house settling. But the next night, it happened again. 3:09 a.m. Thud. Not louder. Not softer. Exactly the same. As if time itself was playing the moment back. Mallory tried to shake it off. She stopped drinking coffee after 6 p.m., burned a little sage she bought during a girls' trip to Sedona, played music from her phone under the pillow, but the attic had other plans. On the 6th night, the sound changed. It wasn't just a thud now. It was followed by a dragging noise. Not sharp like claws or nails, more like something soft, slapping in rhythm against the attic floor. Like bare feet. Mallory stood under the attic hatch the next morning and stared at the cord hanging down like a noose. She could feel the weight of it even when she wasn't looking. She tried pulling it once. The ladder creaked as it folded down, groaning like it didn't want to be disturbed. The air that spilled out smelled wrong, musty, but colder than it should have been. Not cold like air conditioning, cold like underground. Like a root cellar no one had visited in years. She climbed 2 rungs and stopped. Darcy started barking low, nervous. She backed down the ladder and pushed it back up, hard enough that dust fell like ash from the ceiling. She didn't try again. The next night, the thud came at 3:09 again. But this time, it was on the ceiling, not the attic floor. Right above her headboard. The drywall shook. Dust fell onto her pillow. Then something scratched. The sound of nails or maybe even teeth digging slowly into the ceiling, drawing a shape she couldn't see. She moved her bed to the living room. It followed. Same time. New room. Different location. Of the thud. Now it wasn't just above her. It was inside the walls, behind the couch, in the corners of the hallway. At 3:09 it arrived like clockwork, like something marking its attendance. And then it started whispering. The first time she heard it, she thought it was the TV, but she'd unplugged the TV, and the voice didn't come from the speakers. It came from the vents, from the power outlets, from the mirror in the guest bathroom. A small, hoarse voice. A child, maybe. Or someone pretending to be a child. Repeating the same phrase. I told her not to close it. One night, Mallory woke to find Darcy whining at the foot of the attic cord. The dog's ears were flattened, tail stiff. Mallory scooped her up and left the house for a motel, where she finally slept for more than 2 hours. In the morning, she called Karen again. No answer. She searched online and found something odd. The listing for her house had been taken down before she even moved in, but a cached version on a realty database showed its sale history. It had been sold 4 times in the past 2 years. Every owner lasted less than 3 months. The previous owner, one Dana Probst, had no forwarding address, no online trail, no record after the sale. Mallory returned with a crowbar, gloves, and a flashlight. This time, she went up. The attic wasn't empty. In the far corner, half buried in insulation and rat droppings, was a wooden toy chest. Victorian. Burn at the edges. Its lid was nailed shut with rusted spikes that looked older than the house itself. The wood was warped in the middle, like something had tried to push out, and across the floor, in a scrawled spiral around the chest, someone had written. In black soot, she closed IT, she closed IT, she closed IT, she ran. She didn't lock the door, she didn't pack a bag. She left the lights on, the sink running, the fridge door open, but as she reached her car and fumbled with her keys, she looked back once. The attic door was open, and from the hatch something, small and wet and smiling, stared down at her. It was still smiling when the attic door closed itself right at 3:09 a.m. They moved into the house on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in early March, the kind of day when the Texas Hill Country smells like cedar and old secrets. Ellie Trent didn't believe in omens, not really, but something about the air as they pulled up the gravel drive made the hairs on her arms rise. Mark, her husband of 7 years, was too busy laughing about the killer deal they got on the place to notice her discomfort. The realtor had said it was quaint, a historical fixer-upper and full of character. Ellie thought. That was just polite code for haunted, but she smiled and nodded like always. The house itself was a faded Victorian, its pale blue siding peeled like old skin, and its wraparound porch sagged at the corners like it was tired of holding secrets. It had been built in 1896, abandoned in 2004, and sat empty ever since, until Mark fell in love with it at first sight. Ellie had only one condition. He promised to let her redo the bedroom. She never liked old wallpaper. It smelled like mildew and memories. The bedroom wallpaper was the first thing she noticed. A pattern of deep red roses sprawled across a background the color of storm clouds. They climbed the walls like vines, curling and twining, their leaves sharp and thorny. They were so vivid it looked like someone had painted them by hand. But when Ellie leaned in to touch the petals, they were cool and strangely damp, like breath against glass. Gross, she muttered. Mark rolled his eyes. It's just moisture from the wall. Old houses do that. We'll get it steamed off this weekend. But Ellie couldn't shake the feeling the roses were watching her. The first night was uneventful, except for the creaking, which they chalked up to settling, and the bedroom temperature, which never seemed to go above 66, no matter how high they turned the thermostat. Ellie bundled under the covers, staring at the rose closest to the headboard. One petal had started to curl at the edge. By the third night, Ellie began to wake at odd times. 2:17 a.m., 3:09, 4:44. Always dead awake, heart pounding, staring at the same corner of the room. The roses looked different in the dark. Less like wallpaper, more like something growing. The petals shone with a slick sheen, and their red deepened to something closer to maroon or dried blood. She touched one in the early hours and found her fingertips stained pink. Mark, she whispered one morning, I think the wallpaper's bleeding. Mark grunted from beside her. That's not a thing, Elle. Go back to sleep. But it was a thing. She proved it to herself. On the fifth night, she laid a square of paper towel on the floor below a section of the wall where the roses were most vibrant. In the morning, there was a single droplet of pink on the towel, faint but undeniably wet. She didn't tell Mark. What was the point? The next week, Mark started staying late at work. He claimed it was for a project. Ellie knew it was. To avoid the house. She heard it in his voice, saw it in the way he kept glancing at the bedroom door, like the darkness inside was waiting to speak. It happened during the storm. A hill country thunderstorm in late March was no joke. The sky split open just after. 11 p.m. lightning cracked so bright it lit the room for half a second, and in that instant Ellie saw something she couldn't explain. The roses were open, not like a drawing. Like mouths. Tiny, wrinkled mouths puckered in the center of each blossom. Some wept clear liquid. One had a single yellowing tooth. She screamed and bolted upright. The walls made a noise, not a creak, not a groan. A rustle like someone was crushing leaves in both hands. The roses were peeling off the walls, one by one, petals lifting in the air like paper flames. They floated for a moment and then dropped, slow and soft, to the hardwood floor. Ellie backed out of the room, choking on a sour metallic smell. As she crossed the threshold, the door slammed behind her hard enough to rattle the hallway mirror. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the stairs, staring down the hallway. The light under the bedroom door pulsed, once, twice, then went dark. The next morning, Mark was gone. His phone was on the charger, wallet on the kitchen counter, truck in the driveway. No note, no footprints on the damp porch, no sign of a break-in. Just gone. Ellie called the sheriff. A big man named Jansen who smelled like aftershave and wet leather. He looked around, made some polite noises, then followed Ellie into the bedroom. When she insisted he stopped just inside the door. What the hell? The wallpaper had bloomed again. The roses were full, vivid, fresh as if painted that morning. Their petals quivered slightly as though something was breathing underneath them. A few glistened. One of them winked. Janssen didn't say anything else. He just turned and walked out. She heard him radio for backup. They brought in 2 deputies and a state inspector. By noon, someone from the university in San Marcos showed up. A woman with pale skin and gloves who didn't smile once. They stripped the wallpaper. It didn't come off like paper. It came off in long, flesh-colored strips that pulsed faintly and left behind a sticky, dark residue on the drywall. The roses bled when torn. One of the petals shrieked, a high, wet whine like a rabbit in a snare. The university woman packed a sample in a sealed bag, double-gloved. She left without speaking to Ellie. The house was sealed off within days, but neighbors said lights came on at night, that the roses were back within a week. This time, they weren't only on the walls. They were on the windows. Ellie moved to her sister's place in San Antonio. She wakes every night at 3:09 a.m. Staring at the walls. She painted them gray, just to be safe. But sometimes when it rains, she smells roses. And once, she woke with something red and petal-soft stuck to her cheek. It curled as she peeled it away. People in Rutherford don't talk about the house at the end of Crawford Lane. Not directly. They call it that place, or the old one past the ditch, or if you catch them at a bar with one too many in their belly, they'll whisper, the baby house. But even then, they'll cross themselves, whether Catholic or not, because some things press down on a town so long, so heavy, they carve out a silence deeper than forgetting. The house doesn't look haunted. That's the first lie. It tells 2 stories, faded blue-gray siding, a porch with a swing that still moves in the wind like an old man rocking memories. The yard's overgrown, sure, but not wild. Ivy crawls lazily up the side like it's too tired to choke anything. And the nursery window, always open, just a crack. Even in storms, nobody remembers who built the house. County records list. A. John and Sarah Whitlow in 1892, but there's no birth records, no family photos, no trace of children. Just one item listed in every inventory report, insurance file, and neighbor tale over the last 130 years. The wooden crib upstairs. White pine, hand-carved, curled vine work on the legs, smooth from years of touch. And no matter who owned the house or how many times it sat vacant, that crib never moved and it always rocks. They say the first time anyone noticed it was right after the Whitlows disappeared. One morning, the milkman left bottles on the porch, and the next day, they were still there, warm, curdled in the sun. The front door was ajar. A neighbor, Miss Langley, who taught Sunday school, stepped inside and swore the house felt wrong, like being watched from the inside out. She didn't go upstairs. But later, the sheriff did. Sheriff Tolbert was a bull of a man, a veteran of the Spanish-American War who didn't believe in ghosts or nonsense. He came out of that house white-lipped, stuttering, with a cut on his hand and a single phrase. A cradle rockin', but no one to rock it. He hung himself a year later. Over the decades, the house passed hands. A painter from Galveston who slit his wrists in the nursery. A widow from Ohio who boarded the second floor and warned local kids to never answer if it calls from above. She died with her ears packed full of cotton and a baby bonnet in her lap. Then came the Holloways. They were good people. Wanted a fresh start. Moved in June of '98. Elaine was pregnant, glowing like summer light. Mark was a carpenter, a quiet man with hands like bark and a voice that warmed your spine. They painted the walls, replaced the rotting stairs, trimmed the weeds, and even polished the crib. They said it was charming. Elaine began hearing things first. Soft humming, like a lullaby sung through a throat that had forgotten how. Then the creaking. At 2:17 a.m., every night without fail, the crib began to rock, back and forth. Mark thought it was wind, or a draft, but he couldn't find a vent, couldn't find anything at all. The air in that room stayed heavy, like a blanket. Soaked in pond water. She started having dreams of a woman in a gray dress with a veil soaked in blood. Rocking, always rocking. Her hands moved, but her face was wrong, blurred like smoke inside a mirror. Elaine would wake up soaked in sweat, her hands clutching her belly. The baby would kick harder those nights, violently, as if trying to. Get out. Then came the nursery sounds. On their baby monitor, gurgles, cooing, once laughter. But the baby hadn't been born yet. One night, 2 weeks before her due date, Elaine went into labor. Too early. The roads were washed out in a freak summer thunderstorm. The landline was dead. Her cell wouldn't turn on. Mark helped her upstairs, laid her on the bed, and ran for towels. When he returned, the crib was rocking, and Elaine was screaming, not in pain, but in rage. Her eyes locked on the crib. "There's someone holding it," she gasped. "She's holding my baby." Mark ran forward, grabbed the crib, but it stopped cold. No one there, no figure. Just the empty cradle, except it wasn't empty. Inside was a smear, red and raw. Not blood, not exactly. More like sap, thick and black. And something moved. Beneath it, slid. The baby was born still. The hospital said umbilical strangulation, but the nurses whispered. One swore the infant's hands were clenched, as if gripping something. Her skin bore impressions, deep ones, like she'd been cradled by wooden arms. Mark left. Couldn't stay. Elaine refused to leave. She said someone had to watch the crib. "She likes company," she whispered to the grocery clerk. "Gets lonely when there's no baby to rock." She was found 6 months later, sitting in the nursery chair, starved, smiling. Her arms cradled a bundle of old cloth. Today, the house stands empty again. Or looks that way. Teenagers still break in on dares. None make it past the landing. Dogs won't step foot on the porch. Cats circle it and cry. Sometimes, if you park on the road and turn your engine off, you can hear it through the open nursery. Window. The creak. Back, forth, back, forth. And if you listen too long, something inside you starts to sway. You'll want to climb the stairs. See what's rocking. But don't, because the baby never lived there. And the crib's always waiting. The morning was humid in that suffocating way only Beaumont could manage, like the air itself had been wrung from a dirty rag and hung to dry across the roofs. Charles Vickers pulled into the cul-de-sac behind a brand-new ranch-style home that still smelled of sawdust and contractor sweat. The driveway shimmered in the heat. The lawn had been rolled out in fresh squares of sod just last week, and the for sale sign still had its price tag dangling from the metal post. Charles stepped out of his van, stretching his back. He was 58 and 2 slip discs past his prime, but he still crawled into more crawl spaces than anyone else in Jefferson County. People trusted him. He had the kind of face that looked honest, round, freckled, with deep smile lines and gray in his mustache. A man who looked like he told the truth, even when he didn't know it yet. Morning came the crisp voice of the realtor, a woman too polished for the neighborhood, wearing heels that were meant for courtrooms and city halls. She flicked her clipboard with red-painted nails. Buyers heard something. Scratching under the house? Probably a possum or raccoon. But they want it checked before the deal closes. Charles nodded. He didn't ask why a brand new build would already have scratching. Houses didn't get haunted right away. Not normally. But this was Texas. Texas was different. He grabbed his tool bag, flashlight, and a pair of thick gloves, then made his way around the side to the crawlspace entrance, a square aluminum door near the Veve unit, about the size of a dog kennel. He knocked once out of habit. He always knocked, coming in. The air changed the moment he opened the hatch. It was like the ground had exhaled. Earthy, damp, and a little metallic, like blood that had dried on stone. Charles clicked on his flashlight, and the beam caught on cobwebs and pink insulation. Everything was as it should be except for the smell, and the quiet dot, no scurrying, no rustling, no nesting sounds. Just silence, thick and expectant. The crawl space was tight. He got down on his belly and pulled himself in, knees scraping. The first thing he saw were the beam's pressure-treated pine, no more than 6 months old, and the second thing he saw was the scratches. They weren't random. They were measured. About 6 inches apart, long, jagged, in groups of 5. Like fingers. Not paw marks, not animal. These were human. He could see the nail grooves. He moved his light slowly. The scratches continued, curling slightly like someone had been dragging their nails forward while slowly turning. A path. Not panicked. Deliberate. They formed a spiral, almost, toward the far corner. Charles hesitated, then kept crawling. His shoulders tightened in the narrow tunnel as the floor dipped slightly. A small pile of dirt had been recently disturbed, black, loamy soil, not the reddish clay of the rest of the property. It looked soft, dug with hands. And in the middle of it sat a tooth, a single baby tooth, yellowed, its root intact, with a faint streak of dried blood along the gum line. He stared at it for a long time. Then he saw the others, 6 of them, half buried in a small pile like coins dropped in a fountain. A strange sound filled the crawl space, then not a voice, not exactly. More like a low vibration, like the hum of a wasp's nest behind drywall. But it came from the earth itself. The hair on his arms rose. He backed away slowly, and something moved in the dirt. Fast, too fast. A hand, no. Fingers burst from the soil and grabbed the cuff of his pants. They were small, pale, and possibly thin and strong. The nails were blackened, cracked, and there was no skin on the knuckles. Charles screamed, kicked free, and scrambled backward, scraping his back raw on the beams above. He didn't stop until he was out of the hole and gasping in the sunlight. Hands shaking so badly he dropped his flashlight. He didn't go back in. He told the realtor there was a feral cat, that he sealed the space, that everything was fine, and he never went near that house again. But a week later, the calls started, not from the buyers. From the woman who moved in after Dot. She found him online. Said her son had started sleepwalking. Said she'd found dirt in his sheets. Said she'd pulled splinters from under his nails even though they had carpeted floors. He asked her where the boy went when he sleepwalked. She said, under the house. She cried when she said it. Said she heard him whispering at night. Said she heard a second voice answering. Charles unplugged his phone that night, but it wasn't enough. 2 nights later, he heard something under his house. And that didn't make sense. He didn't have a crawl space. He'd built his place on concrete slab, nothing under there but earth and piping. And yet, at 3:13 a.m., he heard the scratching. Slow, deep, and rhythmic. He pressed his ear to the tile. In the bathroom, and he swore he heard breathing. He tore up the floor that same morning. What he found wasn't possible. The concrete was cracked from beneath, like something had clawed upward. He found more teeth and scratched into the slab, so faint it could have been a dream. Was his own name, Charles, backwards. As if viewed from the other side, he moved to a Pedova side. He moved to a motel on Highway 90 and never slept in that house again. They bulldozed the house on Beaumont. Drive 3 months later, but the inspectors say the scratching still comes. Even now, just deeper, just closer. And they've stopped putting homes there, but you can still hear it. If you go stand on the lot at night, put your ear to the ground, wait, you single quotes LL hear nails. 5 at a time. They said the neighborhood was crafted for comfort. A new development, close to the freeway, but not so close you'd hear it. Kids rode bikes down cul-de-sacs with names like Buttercup Lane and Honeysuckle Drive. It was a place where porch swings still mattered, where the HOA newsletter talked more about bake sales than crime. Paige Harrington liked that. After too many years in downtown Austin, where sirens blended with her dreams and you couldn't tell your neighbor's name if your life depended on it, Elm Grove felt like the quiet middle America she'd grown up romanticizing. She wasn't running from anything, she told herself. Not exactly. The job was still hers, even if it was remote now. Her parents were both gone, but that had been years ago. And no, she hadn't just broken off an engagement. That ring had never made it out of the box. Paige was 35, single, childless, and finally okay with it. She wanted stillness. She wanted to garden. She wanted to hear herself think again. So when she drove past the model home on Willow Bend Drive and saw the reduced price sign out front, something clenched in her chest. A silent yes. The house was perfect in the way department store mannequins are still, beautiful and hollow. 2 bedrooms, a tidy kitchen, even a coffee bar built into the dining nook. She signed the paperwork within a week. The agent, a woman, with 2 white teeth and a laugh that went on too long, handed over the keys and said, "You're gonna love it here, sweetie. Just you wait." She moved in on a Friday. That Sunday evening, she noticed the first shadow dot. It was late spring, the kind of Texas evening where the breeze smells like fresh-cut grass and mosquito spray. Paige sat on the porch swing, sipping mint tea. Hazel the cat curled like a comma on the wicker bench beside her. The sky was lavender and gold, the kind of sky that makes you want to paint even if you've never touched a brush. The porch light flicked on as the sun dipped. Paige stood, stretched, and saw it. Her shadow stretched out before her on the wooden deck, but right beside it was another, just as tall, maybe taller. The shoulders were broader. The shape not quite right, not feline. Not hers. She turned. Nothing. The yard was empty. The street too. No wind. No person. No light source that would explain that second silhouette. Hazel lifted her head, hissed once, then jumped down and trotted inside. Paige told herself it was a trick of light. A reflection off the car window. The neighbor's porch light. Anything. The next night, it happened again. She stood on the porch. 2 shadows dot by Wednesday. The second shadow started moving before she did dot. It didn't copy her. It didn't even pretend. If she stood still, it would rock gently, as if shifting weight. Sometimes it lifted an arm. Once she watched it lean toward her like it wanted to whisper something. She didn't tell anyone. Who would she tell? Amanda? Amanda would say she was just stressed, working too hard. Her brother, Mark? He hadn't called her since their mom's funeral. The shadows became her secret. Something she couldn't explain but lived with like a bruise you don't remember getting but that never fades. Some nights, she'd flick the porch light on and stand there for hours, staring at the second shape, willing it to do something. Concrete. She even spoke to it once. "Who are you?" It tilted its head. That night, Paige dreamed of being buried alive under the porch. Not violently. Just placed there softly, like someone gently pressing dirt over a sleeping body. She stopped sitting outside, but the shadows didn't stop. They followed her in. She saw them on the wall across from her bed, on the refrigerator door when she reached for milk, in the fogged mirror after a shower. Always 2. One hers. the other not. Hazel wouldn't come upstairs anymore. She slept in the laundry room. Paige tried to rationalize. Sleep deprivation, eye strain. She went to an optometrist. Perfect vision. She installed blackout curtains. The shadows came anyway, cast from nowhere. She checked property records. The home had technically never been lived in. Built 6 years ago as a model, it had sat on the market ever since. A man had made an offer once, but the sale fell through. The agent wouldn't say why. One night, Paige left the porch light off. The house groaned around her in the kind of silence that wasn't quite silent like it had breath. She didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling until a sound tapped her awake. Step. Step. Pause. Then again. Step. Step. Something walking across the porch, then down the steps, then onto the grass. She heard the rustle of hedges. She turned on the light, opened the door. Nothing. But the next morning, there were 2 sets of muddy footprints on the welcome mat. One set matched her boots from yesterday. The other? Barefoot. Much larger. She started keeping the front door locked with 3 deadbolts. She stopped sleeping. Hazel began clawing at closed doors and meowing into corners. On the 4th Monday, she heard the doorbell ring at 2:17 a.m. She didn't answer. Just peeked through the peephole. There was no one there, but 2 shadows walked away from the door. Slowly, one after the other, as if whoever or whatever had come didn't care if they were seen. Paige tried to leave. Packed a bag. Drove to a motel 5 miles away. At 3:02 a.m., her phone buzzed. It was her own number calling. She didn't answer. Then the motel lamp flickered. On the far wall, 2 shadows. She returned the next day. Weeks passed. The neighbors avoided her now. Didn't wave. Crossed the street when walking dogs. She watched them from her kitchen window, her eyes darker each morning. She doesn't go outside anymore. The grass is knee-high. Flyers hang limp on her door, untouched. She still lives there. Alone, technically. But every dusk, if you drive by slow enough, you'll see the porch light blink on and 2 shadows cast across the lawn, moving toward the street. One is Paige, and the other is what moved in with her, whether she invited it or not. The house on Hollow Pine Road had been vacant for nearly 15 years when Derek and Jasmine Booker bought it. A 2-bedroom craftsman with a sagging porch and faded shutters, it sat at the edge of a tree line just outside Nacogdoches, where pine needles carpeted everything and the sky turned molasses thick in summer. Jasmine called it a fresh start. Derek, who had just quit drinking after nearly wrecking his car with their daughter in the back seat, called it a reset button. They signed the papers in April and moved in by May. The house came with everything: old floors, bad wiring, and a smell in the back room like wet dirt and iron. But the walls were what Jasmine noticed first. In every room, the paint was thin and oddly slick, like a clear coat over something that didn't want to stay buried. The living room in particular was strange. The east wall had what looked like faint brush patterns beneath the beige, almost like someone had scrawled something in black paint, then hurried to cover it up. Jasmine ran her hand across it one morning and pulled back with a dusting of soot on her fingertips. Derek laughed it off, said maybe someone had used charcoal primer. But primer didn't bleed. The trouble started after the first coat of white went up. Jasmine had insisted on repainting everything herself. Said it made her feel connected to the place, like she was claiming it. She played music, wore old overalls, and didn't mind the sweat. That Sunday, she finished the living room. 3 coats, bright eggshell white. Crisp, clean, erasing whatever came before. Monday morning, the east wall was gray again, not all of it, just a patch. A smooth smear of dark gray stretching 6 feet across and 3 feet high, like something underneath was leaking through. She thought maybe the primer had failed. Maybe moisture in the drywall. She painted over it again. By nightfall, it had returned. That night, Derek found her in the living room at 2:12 a.m., standing barefoot in front of the wall with a paint roller still dripping in one hand. She didn't respond when he called her name. Her eyes were fixed, glazed. He stepped between her and the wall, and that's when she dropped the roller, blinked twice, and said, "I think something's trying to show me something." He made her sleep downstairs that night, just in case. The next morning, he covered the wall in sealant, then 2 layers of fresh white latex. He stood back, hands on his hips, proud. By evening, the gray was back and it had shifted. Not a smear. Now, a shape. An arc, like a mouth opening. He called a contractor to check the drywall. The man peeled off a square and froze. Behind it, more wall. Older, blackened, with symbols carved in slanted lines, spirals, and crosses. "Y'all should have left this alone," the man muttered. "You covered something that wasn't done speaking." That night, the house began to. Low and steady. You couldn't hear it unless you were still, but it vibrated through the floorboards, up your spine, into your teeth. Jasmine said it made her dreams feel like someone else's memories, hot, close, and full of scratching. Then the paint began to move, slow at first, peeling at the edges of the east wall. Paint flakes curled like petals, fell soundlessly to the floor. Beneath them, dark streaks. Writing. Derek scraped a chunk of it back with a putty knife and revealed a sentence. "Bring back the color." They tried repainting it in blue, then green. Then a soft yellow Jasmine said reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen. Each time, the wall rejected it. Peeled, bled, or simply turned the color back to ash gray overnight. Then came the names. Scrawled in that same dark smear, one morning in July, L. Banner, 1912. A week later, M. Riley, 1938. Then Swatkins, 1964. Dozens of them. Faint, but growing darker with each day. They researched the names. Jasmine combed old archives at the Nacogdoches Library. Every one of them had lived in the house. Every one of them had died under strange circumstances. Fires, disappearances, unexplained. Falls, cardiac arrests with no warning signs. The last name that appeared in perfect cursive was Jasmine B. Bucher. That night, she stopped speaking. Derek found her sitting cross-legged in front of the wall, brush in hand, eyes wide. She was painting again, but not white this time. Charcoal. Thick, fast strokes, like her hand wasn't her own. The wall shivered. Derek tried to pull her back. She bit him, hard, drew blood. He locked himself in the bedroom and called the police. When they arrived, Jasmine was gone. Her car was still in the driveway, every door locked from inside. Her name now glowed black on the wall, brighter than the rest. They never found her. Wall still stands. The bank boarded up the windows, but neighbors swear they see light inside. And sometimes, around 2:12 a.m., people walking their dogs hear the scrape of a paintbrush. And in the morning, there's always a new name. Claire Pearson had always trusted her memory. As a freelance editor who specialized in continuity for horror novelists, details were her life. She could spot an inconsistent description across 400 pages, recall names of background characters. In novels she'd proofread months earlier. So when she moved into the one-story ranch on Milburn Street, she knew the guest room closet was on the left side, not the right. She didn't even unpack fully that first week. Just the essentials, clothes, laptop, kettle, the cat's litter box. Boxes were still stacked in corners, flattened packing tape curling like dry leaves. Her black cat, Bishop, slunk low across the hardwood as if something about the house itched beneath his fur. The realtor had sold it as a quiet fixer-upper with character. A code Claire understood meant cheap, ugly, probably haunted. But she didn't mind character. She wanted solitude. The house had 3 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, a low roof, and an overgrown yard with a cracked bird bath. There were no signs of anything sinister, just creaky floorboards, old paint, a strange musky smell in the closets. Then came the closet incident. She remembered vividly it had been on the left. She even hung her bag on the doorknob and opened it to check for moisture. She remembered the interior, the little shelf, the metal bar that clanked when she brushed it. Now, 3 days later, the closet was on the right, and the left side was just a blank wall, smooth, untouched. Her first thought was stroke. Her second, no, gas leak. She sniffed the air. Nothing but lemon cleaner and the faint scent of wood. She went to the kitchen and checked the stove. Electric, no gas. She sat down at the tiny table by the window and stared out at the yard. Her breath fogged the glass. It was cold for April. She told herself she had misremembered until the next morning. She woke up in a room that felt slightly wrong. The window now faced a different angle. She could see the neighbor's chimney instead of their backyard swing. And her knit stand, which had always been tucked against the west wall, now stood against the north. She opened the bedroom door, expecting the hallway. What greeted her was not the narrow hallway she'd walked every morning for a week. It was wider now, slightly. The trim was newer, whiter. The light switch was on the opposite wall. She backed up and closed the door, opened it again. The hallway was normal, but her heart pounded all the same. By the 7th night, Claire began drawing. Floor plans, one each night before bed. The layout of the house, room by room, door by door. She kept a notebook beside her pillow and would sketch in the dark, labeling directions, fixtures, light placements. In the morning, she'd compare the drawing with the real thing. And every morning, something had changed. Once it was the linen closet, which moved to a different hallway. Another time it was the bathroom door, which now opened into the laundry room. A baseboard heater disappeared overnight. A mirror hung slightly off kilter the next day, even though she'd leveled it with a bubble level herself. And always the changes were small. Just small enough to make her question herself. Just enough to make her doubt her own notes, until they weren't small. On the 12th night, she fell asleep on the couch, pen still in hand, floor plan half finished. Bishop hissed at something unseen and jumped off her lap. She awoke hours later to darkness. No moonlight, no street lamps. Just darkness so deep it felt like fabric pressing against her eyes. She stood, legs tingling with pins and needles, and turned on her phone flashlight. The couch was gone. No rug. No coffee table. Just a smooth, blank floor. Bare walls. One door. She stumbled to it, opened it, and found herself in a hallway she'd never seen before. Longer. Ceilings higher. Sconces flickered along the walls, like old gas lamps. And it smelled different, like damp concrete and forgotten paper. She turned back. The room she'd come from was gone. She walked out and the house stretched with her. The floor sloped downward, subtly at first, then with more intention. Like she was descending, her breath came quick and shallow. Her pen dropped somewhere behind her, forgotten. Finally, she reached a door, newer than the rest. Shiny brass knob, painted gray. She opened it. Inside was her bedroom. Not a bedroom. Her bedroom. Same comforter, same bookshelf, same crooked lamp, but everything was reversed. The entire layout mirrored. Even Bishop sat curled up on the opposite side of the bed, blinking slowly at her like he'd been expecting this. Check the time, 3:33 a.m. in the morning. The house was back to normal or close enough. Her floor plan notebook was missing. Bishop wouldn't leave the WINDOWSILL. She tried to call someone, anyone, but her phone wouldn't hold a signal. Not even Wi-Fi. She walked outside, and that's when she realized the sky was wrong, too still. Clouds didn't move. The birds made no sound. The neighbor's house looked painted on flat like a backdrop in an old stage play. She turned and looked back at her house. It looked taller than she remembered, and there were more windows now. That night, she went to sleep with a knife under her pillow and a pencil gripped in her hand. She meant to stay awake. She didn't. She woke up somewhere deep, somewhere below the house. The ceiling was rock. The floor was wood. Carved into the walls were floor plans, hundreds of them, scrawled in ash and blood and chalk. Each one slightly different. Rooms bending, twisting. Stairs leading into walls. Closets becoming doors. Doors becoming mouths. And in the center, an old drafting table. On it lay her notebook. Open. Still warm. Claire doesn't leave the house now. She can't. The door leads to the pantry. The pantry leads to the den. The den leads to the attic. And the attic. The attic is watching. Some nights she sees her old self through the walls, blurred like a double exposure. A version of her in another layout. Another version of the house. Sometimes they scream the same words at the same time, but mostly she listens, because the house whispers in its sleep, and it's still building, still redesigning, and it's learning her favorite rooms. It was the kind of deal that felt wrong even as it felt necessary. Diego Alvarez had been sleeping in his car for 3 nights after a fight with his older brother in Round Rock turned into something permanent. A shattered window, a bruised jaw, and the kind of silence that doesn't break. He was eating dry ramen and gas station jerky when he found the ad on Facebook Marketplace, 1BR Studio, Pflugerville. Detached guest house, $475 month. All utilities included private entrance, quiet area, furnished, no pets. Do not attempt to open the storage door. That last line stuck out, sure, but so did the price. $475 with electric and water in 2025? It sounded like bait, but Diego was too broke to be picky and too tired to care. He met the landlord the next day. Name was Harrow. A small white man in slacks and a white-collared shirt that looked ironed straight onto his frame. Thin glasses, thin smile. No handshake. The lease is month to month, Harrow said, unlocking the gate to the backyard. You'll be staying in the guest house. The main house is vacant. I don't live here anymore, Diego frowned. So you just manage the property? I own it, Harrow said quickly. But I don't stay overnight. He said it in a tone like Diego shouldn't either, but handed him the keys and walked away without another word. The guest house was small, but livable. A converted garage with a mini kitchen, a low ceiling, and a single hallway leading to the bedroom and bath. The furniture was old but clean. Plaid couch, a bed with no headboard, and a dusty glass coffee table etched with rings. Everything about it felt favosed in between uses. Like a motel room that never forgot the last person who slept there. At the end of the hall was the storage door. It was old wood, not painted, not finished, just raw pine with a warped grain and a brass handle. No knob, just a latch and a black keyhole. No hinges on Diego's side. He knocked once out of curiosity. It was solid, denser than the rest of the drywall. Sound didn't bounce off it. It absorbed. That night, something scraped along the floorboards behind that door. Just a single drag, like someone shifting their weight or pulling a bag across. The wood. It came around 3 a.m. Diego sat up in bed and listened. The sound didn't come again. By the third night, the scraping came with whispering, not words. Just air being pushed around by lips not shaped to speak. Dry, cracked lips. Like something trying to remember how to form sounds. Diego pressed his ear to the door. He didn't hear breath. He heard hunger. Something about the space beyond the storage door didn't line up. He measured the entire unit, 10 feet wide, 16 feet deep. But from the outside, the guest house extended another 4 feet past the bedroom wall. That meant the storage room was at least 4 feet deep. Yet, inside, it felt like there was more. An echo when he tapped it. A delay, like the sound traveled before returning. It wasn't a closet. It was a room. Bigger than it should have been. One night, he laid his phone under the door with the camera on and recording. Slid it forward until only the lens peeked into the keyhole gap. The next morning, the phone was gone. He found it in the bathroom sink, waterlogged, no video. Just a still frame frozen on the screen. Something pale and hairless curled in the falana. Corner of the storage room, just out of the lens, except for one hand, resting gently on the floor as though it were reaching for him. That same day, he noticed something in the mirror. He was brushing his teeth when he saw it, a shadow behind his reflection, not in the room, just in the glass. He turned fast, heart kicking. Nothing there. But his reflection smiled a moment longer than his. Face did. And then blinked after he'd already turned away. He started staying out during the day. At the library. In cafes. Places with chatter and light and people who didn't carry shadows under their skin. But he always returned to the guest house. Before dark. Not because he wanted to, because his legs stopped working right around dusk. Like the house wanted him back, and he never dreamt anymore. He just opened his eyes at 3:07 a.m. every single night, eyes open, door closed. And always that same whisper behind the wood. He wore it first. You'll wear it better. Diego. Called Harrow. Left voicemails. Texted. No answer. Until one day, he got a reply. A single text. It fits tighter if you struggle. Let it take shape. That was the night Diego stopped leaving the house. Neighbors didn't see him on the porch. Didn't hear his car anymore. The landlord relisted the unit a few days later. New listing had the same photo, same plaid couch, same table, but in the hallway mirror, if you zoomed in, something stands just behind the storage door. Its skin doesn't fit quite right. Too tight in the face. Fingers too long. Head tilted like it hasn't figured out how to hold itself upright, but it tries. And if you ever get the keys, the doors. Still locked. Just listen closely. Because now, when it scrapes the floor, it drags its foot differently. Like a limp. Like it's still learning how to walk in Diego's body. Driftwood, Texas was the kind of place people passed through without meaning to. One moment you were taking the scenic route out of Austin, and the next you'd blinked and missed it. Just a rusted welcome sign, a diner with peeling letters, and a Baptist church that hadn't held a sermon since the Clinton administration. There were stories, sure. Every dried-up town has its share, but they didn't hang on ghosts or murders. No, Driftwood stories sank deeper than that. They hummed through the ground like something buried too long and still breathing. Donnie Tibbetts didn't care about any of that. He was a work-for-cash landscaper, drifting job to job with a truck that rattled over 40 and a back full of tools older than he was. He didn't believe in curses or old bones. He believed in dirt and roots and sweat. When a young couple from Houston bought a fixer-upper just outside Driftwood 917 Juniper Hollow. They found his number stapled to a telephone pole in town. Needed the lot cleared, the trees trimmed, the weeds pulled. Simple work. Donnie liked simple. The house itself was a half-built skeleton, abandoned mid-construction years ago. No porch railings, no shingles on the back slope of the roof. The backyard was a wild thicket of brush and burrs, the ground uneven, like it had shifted beneath the house, like the earth had tried to shrug it off. Donnie started work early Monday morning. South Texas heat was already pushing into the high 80s, and the air smelled like sunburnt mesquite and dry insulation. He slung his weed trimmer across the fence, kicked open the back gate, and got to work. The job moved quick, hours rolling by in the buzz of machinery and the drone of cicadas. He didn't notice the patch of earth at first. It was near the back fence, where the oak trees leaned too far in. Where the grass didn't grow. It was a perfect circle bare earth, loose and soft like something had stirred it from beneath. That should have been his first clue. By late afternoon, Donnie was ankle deep in the hole, gloved hands tossing clods of dirt like scoops of ash. He was looking for old pipes, maybe roots, maybe a buried stone slab. That's what he told himself. But deep down, he didn't know why he kept digging. It felt good. It felt right. The soil down there wasn't like the rest, darker, damper, almost slick. Like it was alive. That's when his hand struck something hard. Not a root. Not rock. Smooth. Curved. Cold. He knelt and began to uncover it, the dirt falling away like dust from glass. The thing was coiled tight, like a serpent mid-lunge but segmented, with fleshy ridges wrapped around a core that gleamed dull green. Embedded along one edge were teeth, hundreds of them. Small, sharp, perfect, forming a grin that stretched. Around the coil like a ring of razors. Donnie froze. It was smiling. That was the moment the sun fell behind the trees, and the first real chill crawled up Donnie's spine like an insect. He stood up, breath caught in his throat, his boots squelching in the black mud. The thing twitched. Only a shudder, barely a flinch, but it moved. And Donnie knew, without knowing how, that it didn't like the sunlight. That the moment it felt the warmth on its flesh, it flinched like a man from boiling water. He dropped his spade, backed away, eyes locked on the coil. It wasn't twitching anymore, just sitting there, waiting. He threw a tarp over it, heavy canvas from the back of the truck, weighted down with rocks. Then he went home. That night, he dreamed of mouths, not faces, just mouths. Circular, hungry, chewing the earth from below. He woke up gagging, the taste of soil in his mouth, nails black with dirt he didn't remember touching. The next day, he returned. The tarp was gone. The hole was deeper. Something had crawled out. He could see the trail wound marks in the dirt, like a massive hose had slithered toward the trees. His breath came shallow as he scanned the shadows under the oaks, the kind of dark that seemed thicker than it should have been. The hole itself stank of rust and damp flesh. Inside, the coil was gone, but the teeth weren't. A few remained in the soil, curved like shark's teeth but black, like they'd never known the sun. Donnie tried to tell someone. The hardware clerk in town, a guy at the gas station. No one listened. One man, old, wrinkled, eyes sunk into his skull, only shook his head and muttered, "Should have let it sleep." That ground don't forgive. That night, the dreams came back. He saw the coil moving under his mattress. He saw the grin in his bathroom mirror, reflected just behind his shoulder. His cat hissed at the closet. Something whispered under the chundanda. Floorboards in a language that tasted like burnt sugar. The next day, he poured concrete in the hole. 5 bags, quick dry, tamped it down and left it smooth as a tombstone. But even as he worked, he felt it watching, from beneath, from the trees, From the corners of his mind, not angry. Not yet. Just amused. Over the next week he changed. Lost weight. Didn't shave. He stopped answering calls. Parked his truck at odd angles as though ready to flee. People noticed. The neighbor across the fence, an old lady who liked puzzles and lemonade, said she'd seen him talking to the dirt. Said she heard laughter at midnight. His voice laughing, but there was a second voice too. Something deeper. Something that didn't belong in a throat. And then one morning Donnie was gone. The truck remained. His tools. His phone was found. Under the back deck, screen cracked, camera open to a blurred shot of the concrete slab. The only other thing they found was a single print in the soil. Not a boot. Not a paw. A perfect spiral, dug an inch deep into the earth. The young couple backed out of the sale. The house was boarded up, and the slab? It cracked open 2 nights later during a thunderstorm. Now, the grass won't grow on that spot. Animals avoid the yard. The air above it stays colder than the rest, even in the July heat. And sometimes, when the wind kicks up, you can hear it, something coiled, something grinning, something waiting for the sun to go down, because in driftwood, you don't dig too deep. You don't smile at the dirt. And you never, ever unearth something that already has teeth. When Mallory first saw Lot 13, she didn't think anything of the number. It wasn't listed that way on the website. Of course, just Willow Glen Phase 2. Modern, sleek, affordable. But on the paperwork she signed at the city planning office, buried among pages of municipal jargon, it was there in plain black ink. Lot 13. She didn't believe in superstition. She'd already dealt with enough real-world her ex's late-night breakdowns, the restraining order that came too late, the months of sleeping with a knife under her pillow. So a number wasn't going to scare her off. The house was perfect. Fresh paint, vaulted ceilings, gray vinyl floors, big windows that looked out on the empty lots behind her, still just dirt and scattered foundation stones. They were building fast in Willow Glen, but for now, Mallory was alone out there, her house the only finished one on a street of promises and plywood skeletons. The realtor was a mousy man named Doan who had sweat stains even in February. He barely looked her in the eye, barely spoke once the paperwork was signed. But just as he handed her the keys, he cleared his throat. If a light ever, comes on that you didn't switch, just ignore it. Some of the wiring's looped weird. These modern circuits, they're all connected. She blinked. What does that mean? He gave a nervous laugh. Just flip it back off. No big deal. The house had a basement. Not common in Texas, which made her excited. Space for a gym, or maybe a studio. Or just storage. But from the first night, she noticed something wrong. The hallway light wouldn't work. The bulb was fine, she'd replaced it herself. But when she flicked the switch, nothing happened in the hallway. Instead, the basement light came on. Through the narrow door beside the kitchen, she saw it glow faintly at the bottom of the stairs. Yellow like old teeth. She tried the bedroom light, same thing. Flick. Basement. Even the living room dimmer. Flick. Basement. It didn't matter which switch she used. Every one of them turned on the light below. She spent the next morning checking the breaker panel. All clean. She tried to call Doan, but he didn't pick up. The number disconnected by the afternoon. By day 3, she'd stopped trying to turn on any lights. She used lamps instead. Battery-powered ones. Candles. But even that didn't help. At 3:13 a.m. that night, she woke to find the basement light on again. She hadn't touched anything. And the door was open, just a few inches. But enough. She crept to it, barefoot on cold vinyl, and peered down the stairs. Nothing moved. The light at the bottom buzzed softly. A slow, rhythmic pulse. She stood there a long time, waiting for anything to shift. Then she closed the door, locked it, pushed the old dining hutch in front of it. The next morning, the hutch was moved. The door wide open, she brought in an electrician. Big guy, confident. Said he'd seen everything. An hour later, he came upstairs pale and quiet. She asked what he'd found. He looked over his shoulder before speaking. There's something wrong with the panel. Wrong how? Wires that don't go anywhere. Switches that loop back on themselves. The light in the basement, there's no fixture. No wiring, it's just on. She laughed, brittle. You're joking. I'm not. The light's coming from somewhere, but it's not electricity. Not anything I can find. What do you mean? He shook his head. I don't think this house is supposed to be here. He left before the coffee finished brewing. That night, Mallory didn't sleep. She sat in her bed with Darcy, her aging border collie, curled beside her. She watched the hallway. At 3:13, the light in the basement flared again. This time she heard something moving. It wasn't footsteps exactly. More like dragging, slow, like something too tired to walk. She grabbed a flashlight and crept to the door. The light glowed stronger now, spilling warm and sickly across the stairs, and the air. It stank, like damp cloth left in a sealed box for too long. Mold and copper. The smell of a wound that never healed. She clicked the flashlight on and aimed it down the stairs. There was nothing, but the light buzzed louder, pulsing, vibrating, like it was alive. Then something moaned. A soft sound, high-pitched and wet, like a child breathing through tears. Mallory slammed the door and shoved a chair under the knob. She didn't sleep that night, nor the next. Each morning, the chair was moved. Each night, the light came on. She tried covering the switch panels with duct tape. Didn't work. Removed the switches entirely. The light still turned on. And always at exactly 13. One night, she waited with her phone ready, filming. The moment the light flared on, she recorded the door. Just static silence, until, frame by frame, something peeked around the bottom stair. Not a person. Not even a shadow. Just a smile. Small, pale, too wide. And then a voice whispering through the phone's speakers, so faint it made her bones itch. Thank you for turning me on. She dropped the phone, smashed it, bought a new one the next day. But every video she took afterward, same whisper, same smile. Weeks passed. Mallory stopped sleeping. She lost weight. Her eyes looked bruised. Darcy stopped going near the basement door one night. She growled so hard her own legs gave out. One afternoon, a knock came at the door. An old woman stood outside, dressed in gray. Her face was thin and sharp, like it had been chiseled rather than born. This house wasn't supposed to be built, she said. Mallory stared at her. They covered it. Years ago, the church. They sealed it underground, buried it in light. What are you talking about? They called it a containment. Lot 13 was meant to remain empty, but they forgot. Or they were paid to forget. Who are you? I lived next door once. Before they tore down the church. Mallory tried to shut the door. The woman grabbed her wrist. Ice-cold fingers. Do not turn it off. Mallory yanked free and slammed the door, but the words stayed. Do not turn it off. That night, Mallory didn't touch a thing. At 3:30 a.m., the light turned on. She stood at the door, listening. And this time, no dragging. No whispers. Only breathing. Right behind the door, she reached out, hand trembling. Then she flipped the nearest switch. The light in the basement went off. And something screamed. Not human, not animal, just rage. Pure and raw. The wall shook. The bulb exploded behind the door, raining glass beneath the floorboards. The house trembled. Then silence. Mallory held her breath. and then slowly every light in the house turned on. One by one, and behind the door, something knocked, once, twice, then whispered, "Now I live upstairs." The next morning, her neighbors finally moved in. A young couple. Bright smiles. Pregnant wife. They waved at her. She didn't wave back. She was too busy unscrewing every bulb in her house, because now, when she turns a switch, any switch, she hears a voice right beside her ear. "Thank you." And sometimes, just sometimes, the light turns on before she touches it. There's something about small-town Texas that makes you believe in ghosts. Maybe it's the stillness, the way the wind skips over the prairie like it's afraid to stay too long. Or maybe it's the churches, too many for one zip code, all empty before noon. Whatever the reason, Willow Bend had ghosts. And the Henderson family brought one back with them. They moved into the house on Buckner Street the spring after Grandpa Henderson died. It had been his place, a single-story ranch built in the 60s with wood paneling, low ceilings, and that kind of brown carpet that always smells like soil when it rains. Grandma had passed the winter before, and now that the house was empty, it fell to Charlie, the eldest son, to take it over. He didn't want to, but he couldn't say no to the free inheritance. So Charlie, his wife Lynn, and their daughter Ellie moved in one Sunday. And the next Sunday, the door opened. It was subtle at first. Just the back door's rusty hinge squealing open around 6:45 a.m., always the same time, always slow, like someone easing it open with shaking hands. Charlie thought it was the wind. Lynn said it was the foundation shifting. Ellie, who was 11 and too quiet for her age, just stared at the door every Saturday night like she was waiting for something. The house had that smell. Old dust, Vicks vapor rub, and boiled cabbage. The scent of a long life. Charlie didn't mind. He'd grown up with it. He told himself he was fine. But every Sunday, he woke up cold. Not normal chill. Deep cold. Bone deep. And there was always a dent in Grandpa's recliner in the den. The one by the back door. The one they'd never dared get rid of. Lynn started finding things out of place. Sunday. Mornings only. A coffee mug in the sink with a faint lipstick ring, though no one in the house wore lipstick. An old newspaper unfolded on the floor near the chair, though they hadn't subscribed to a paper. Once, a faint smell of pipe smoke, despite no one smoking since Grandpa's stroke 5 years back. Then Ellie started talking to someone. Sunday friend, she called him. She'd whisper into empty corners of the room and giggle. When Charlie asked who she was talking to, she just said, "Grandpa's visitor." Not Grandpa. Grandpa's visitor. He tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was her way of grieving. Kids have weird minds. But then came the tape. Charlie had a home security system, one of those cheap ones you stick on windows and doors with double-sided tape. Every Sunday morning, the back door camera caught static between 6:43 and 6:50. Always the same time window. Always the same glitch. He replaced the camera, changed the batteries, upgraded the router. Still static. Always 7 minutes. Then came the Sunday Ellie didn't come down for pancakes. They found her in the den, fast asleep in Grandpa's chair. The back door was ajar. Her feet were ice cold, her lips pale. When Lynn shook her awake, Ellie opened her eyes and whispered, "He's cold because nobody remembers his name." "What name, sweetheart?" Lynn asked. But Ellie just started crying. That night, Charlie went into the attic, found the old family records. Grandpa Henderson's birth certificate, medical files, photos, lots of them. But one photo caught his eye, a black and white shot from 1947. Grandpa and another man sitting side by side on the porch of the very same house. The second man was younger, narrow face, wearing the same suspenders Charlie now kept in a drawer. The back of the photo had one sentence written in fading ink. Me and Lowell before he drowned. Charlie had never heard of a Lowell. He asked his uncle, his cousin, even the nosy old neighbor who smoked on her porch all day. No one remembered a Lowell, not a brother, not a friend, not a cousin, not a damn soul. Just a name buried in dust. Sunday came again. The door opened. And this time, Charlie was waiting. He sat in Grandpa's chair, shotgun across his lap, heart thudding like a clock winding down. The door creaked. A breeze swept in, but it wasn't a breeze. It was thicker, wet, like pond water and mildew. The air turned dense, hard to breathe, and then the chair got cold. So cold Charlie's bones ached. His teeth chattered. He looked down and saw a hand resting on his dot. It wasn't Lynn's, wasn't Ellie's. It was gray, long fingers, too many knuckles. Cold as stone. Charlie screamed, fired the shotgun. The sound shook the windows. Lynn ran in, screaming. The chair was empty. The door closed. The shell embedded in the ceiling dot. After that, the Sunday stopped. For a while, until Ellie came downstairs one morning and said, "I gave him the suspenders. He says thank you." They moved out that summer, left the chair, left the house. Now, the new family at 218 Buckner Street swears the back door sticks every Sunday morning. They haven't changed the recliner, but they did repaint the den pale blue, the color of pond water. It was the kind of house you got a deal on for a reason. Matt Carson had just moved to Plano, Texas for a job in IT support. The kind that sounded important in emails but meant long hours in a cubicle and a paycheck that didn't stretch far. So when he found a one-bedroom rental on the edge of the historic district, old brick exterior, hardwood floors, and dirt cheap rent, he didn't ask questions. Not out loud, but he should have. The place had quirks. The ceiling fan ticked, like a clock. The water in the shower came out lukewarm no matter where you turned the handle. And there was this one wall socket in the living room under the window. That was off. Matt noticed it the first week. It didn't sit flush with the wall. The metal plate was slightly warped, almost bowed outward. And the socket itself was pitch black inside, darker than it should have been. Like it led to more than just wires and wood. At first, he thought it was faulty. A fire hazard. He avoided it. Didn't plug anything in. Left that wall bare. But one evening, as he was rearranging furniture, he crouched nearby and heard something. A whisper. Just a flutter of sound. Like wind, but not wind. He leaned closer. Nothing. He chuckled to himself, shaking off the weird jolt that ran through his spine. But 2 nights later, he heard it again. Clearer. Not just sound. Words. Soft, breathless murmurs like paper rubbed between fingers. And though he couldn't make out the syllables, he could feel them. Like static buzzing in the soft tissue behind his ears. He backed away. He called the landlord. Asked if there had ever been wiring issues. "Not that I know of," the man grunted. "That unit's been empty a while. 10 years maybe. Last guy left without warning. Never came back for his things." Matt asked what unit number he was in. The landlord paused. "I thought we removed that listing." That night, Matt dreamed of the socket. Not the room, not the house. Just the socket. He was staring at it, eye level, and it was breathing. Expanding and contracting like a lung. From the openings came faint gray smoke and tiny shapes. Hands. Mouths. He reached toward it and woke up gasping. Hand outstretched in the dark, he'd fallen asleep on the couch. Right beside the socket. The whispering had returned. But it wasn't unintelligible now. It was saying his name. Matt. Matt. A-A-A-T-T. He started avoiding that part of the room entirely. Moved his chair. Slept in the bedroom with the door closed. Stuffed a towel under the frame. But it didn't help. The voices came through the walls now, through the vents, through his headphones. Static-laced whispers overlaying music and Zoom calls. He threw out his speakers, his earbuds, even his smart assistant. Nothing worked, and the socket was changing. He swore it was wider now, the blackness inside it deeper. One afternoon, he swore he saw the socket twitch, just once, when the sunlight hit it. Like something was shifting inside, reacting to the light. He bought electrical tape and sealed it shut. The next morning, the tape was on the floor, neatly peeled and folded. The socket was humming. Matt brought over an electrician from across town, a buddy of a buddy. The man took one look at the wall and paled. "That ain't right," he said. "That wiring's not from this century." He unscrewed the faceplate and gasped. "There were no wires. Just space. Black, endless space." The man dropped his screwdriver and walked out without a word. Matt didn't blame him. That night, the socket whispered again, longer now. "Clearer. Come closer. We remember you. You belong here." He screamed at it, covered it again, piled books, blankets, boxes in front of it. The next morning, everything was moved neatly aside. The socket was open, no faceplate at all. Something had pushed its way forward. Not a wire, not a tool. A finger, small, thin, gray, tapping once against the floor. Matt tried to move out, but the door wouldn't open. The windows wouldn't break. His phone only displayed static. Every mirror in the house now showed the living room wall behind him, no matter where the mirror was mounted. And the socket? The socket spoke now, not just whispers, but full sentences and voices he recognized. His mother, his childhood friend, his ex-girlfriend from college. Each one saying the same thing. "Just plug it in, Matt. Plug yourself in." It's been 3 days since he stopped sleeping. The socket is bigger now, almost wide enough for a hand. He swears it pulses at night, glows a little in the dark. And now, every time he walks past a mirror, he sees himself standing in the living room, back turned, staring at the wall. But he's not moving. He's waiting. And tonight, the socket said something new. Not a plea, not a lure, but a promise. Last one stayed forever. And the faceplate is gone again, and so is Bishop the cat. And the only thing left in the room is the quiet electric hum of something opening. Miles Kenner had spent most of his adult life mapping things that didn't want to be found. Not mythical cities or pirate treasure, just the off-the-grid kind of stuff. Private roads that had changed names, abandoned oil derricks, entire ghost. Subdivisions that were started and never finished. He had worked for Garmin once, then a government contractor, and now a startup out of Austin that was trying to build the next generation topography model using satellite triangulation. And ground reports. It was simple work most of the time. Pin a site, visit it, confirm it exists or log its absence. But this job was different from the moment it loaded. The pin was dropped off Kreutzberg Road, north of Burney. It sat in a tight horseshoe bend of private ranch land on terrain that should have been inaccessible. No registered driveway, no municipal plumbing, no satellite tag. Yet there was the assignment note, field confirmation request. Structure present, unregistered. Elevation anomaly 2.2 meters, image capture incomplete. Return corrupted. Miles had seen incomplete images before, usually some kind of glitch. But this one was different. It was blank, not just pixelated, but voided out. A perfect silhouette of where a structure should be, surrounded by trees, like a house-shaped hole had been punched in the photograph. A blacked-out shape with sharp, perfect edges, like it refused to reflect light. That caught his attention. He drove out the next morning in his dusty, White Tacoma with a cold monster in the Q folder and a revolver under the seat. He always brought the revolver, not for ghosts, for meth heads and trespassers who didn't like surveyors poking around. The sun was out but didn't seem to land on the spot where the pin was placed. The sky dimmed just slightly as he turned, off onto the unmarked dirt path the GPS said shouldn't exist. No signage, no fencing, no mailbox. Just cedar trees closing in like claws. The house stood alone, not old, not quite new. White wood siding with a brick chimney that didn't look like it had ever smoked. 2 visible windows on the second floor, glass too clean, curtains too still. There was a porch but no steps, just packed dirt and a screen door with no handle. Miles. Blink. He checked his GPS. No signal. No elevation reading. The time stamp had frozen. He took a photo. When he reviewed it, the house wasn't there. Just an empty patch of land, dry grass, and shadows that didn't match the angle of the sun. He looked up. The house was still right in front of him. He walked to the porch. There was a small brass plaque nailed to the left of the door. No house number, just a symbol. A spiral, etched like it had been carved by something not quite human. Below it, barely legible. Kellerheim German maybe. He didn't speak it. He made a voice memo to check later, but the recorder app had locked up, repeating the same 3-second loop. His own voice breathing. Just breathing. The door creaked open. No one had opened it. No one was inside, but something expected him. The foyer was dim, paneled in wood that looked water-warped. Dust hung in the air but never landed. There was no scent, not mold, not rot, nothing. Just silence. And then he noticed the photos. Hundreds of them, covering the hallway walls. All black and white. All showing the same house, but in different eras. Early 1900s, 1950s, 1970s, and then strange ones that looked futuristic, like the house existed before photography and after it. But in every photo, something was off. The windows were too dark. The trees in the background had no leaves, even in summer scenes. In some, the house was surrounded by people, blurred, as if they were moving too fast to capture. In one of the photos, mid-1980s, based on the Polaroid color, Miles saw a figure that looked just like him. Same flannel, same vest, holding a GPS receiver that hadn't even been invented at the time. He kept walking. The hallway narrowed. The walls seemed to close. He passed a mirror. His reflection didn't follow. Then he passed another mirror. This one showed him from behind. He spun. No one. But the reflection didn't move. It just stared, back turned, standing completely still in the frame. He turned to run. The hallway stretched. The door he'd come through was gone. In its place, another door. Wood, heavy, with the same spiral symbol etched across the center, but deeper now. Like the door was the symbol. Like it had grown from it. He opened it. Inside was a room filled with desks. Dozens. Maps pinned to the walls, pages scattered across. The tables, all showing the same shape again and again. The house. Coordinates circling it. GPS loops tangled like knots. And pinned dead center on the far wall. A paper with his name. Miles Kenner, field technician. Missing since March 2017. He blinked. That wasn't right. It was May 22/5. He reached for his phone. Battery dead. His watch? Frozen on 3:33. He grabbed the sheet, backed away, and turned. There were footsteps now. Slow, bare, from the floor. Above. He bolted. The hallway didn't lead to the foyer anymore. Just staircases curling up and down. He chose down. Down led to a basement with no walls, just dirt, freshly turned, a mound in the center. He stepped closer and saw the tip of a boot, the same kind he was wearing, Then he saw himself half buried. Mouth open, eyes glassy, but the version lying in the dirt was smiling. The lights went out. The last thing he heard was a voice, low, dry, female, whispering in the dark. "We never built this house. We just let it be found." Postscript. 2 months later, a new pin appeared in the map database. Same location, same anomaly. The name listed on the metadata entry read Ming Kenner under status. It said, Live, pending sync. But the house still doesn't appear on any satellite map. Unless you drive out there, take the left at the Cedar Grove, and find the trail that no GPS will follow. You might see it then. You might even be let inside, but you won't find your way out. Garland, Texas had its own flavor of suburban monotony. Split-level homes with cracked driveways, fences bleached gray by the sun, and kids who grew up just bored enough to throw rocks at old sheds and swear they saw something move behind them. It was the kind of place where the weird things got passed off as weather, stray animals, bad lighting. You heard a bump in the night? Squirrel in the attic. Saw something strange in the woods? Maybe a coyote. Garland didn't have monsters. Just mold and mildew and bad dreams after too much barbecue. But something did move in one summer. Something that didn't make sense. And it started with a dog named Rufus. The Green family had just moved into their fixer-upper on Beaver Run Lane. Kyle and Jen, newly married, no kids, just a mutt rescued from a shelter and a mortgage they barely understood. Rufus was half lab, half German shepherd, all heart. Loyal, loud, a little neurotic. He wasn't much of a guard dog, more of a walking panic attack in fur, but he had a bark that could shake the blinds down at first. They thought he was just adjusting. He'd pace. The backyard at dusk, hackles raised, growling low in his throat at the line of trees that edged the property. His ears would twitch towards something they couldn't see, something in the darkness beyond the cedar fence, in that mess of tangled brush and brambles locals called the thicket. It was maybe an acre of undeveloped land, a small patch, of wilderness surrounded by cul-de-sacs and swing sets. The first time it happened, Kyle laughed. "He's seeing shadows," he said. "Big dumb shadows." But the growling got worse. Every night, just after sundown, Rufus would stand at the sliding glass door and stare, his body stiff, tail tucked. A low, guttural growl, like something deep inside him recognized what his eyes couldn't name. Kyle tried letting him out once. Rufus took 3 steps into the yard, stopped, and turned around so fast he smacked into the door trying to get back in. Jean stopped laughing after that. They tried everything. Trainers, calming collars, vet, checkups. Nothing worked. Rufus wouldn't go near the back fence. He barely touched his food. He only barked after dark, and only toward the thicket. Then came the night they saw it. It was late. Almost 2 a.m. Jeanne had insomnia again. She was sipping a warm mug of milk and watching reruns of Murder, she wrote. Kyle was snoring in the bedroom. Rufus stood rigid by the back door, nose pressed to the glass, growling like his throat was made of gravel. Jen sighed, set her mug down, and walked over. "What is it now, buddy?" She expected a raccoon. Maybe a possum. Something with eyeshine and twitchy paws. What she saw instead made her drop the mug. It didn't shatter. It splashed, the milk puddling unnoticed around her bare feet. Something was standing at the edge of the yard, not crouched, not crawling, standing on 2 legs. Its outline was long, lanky, wrong. Like a wolf pulled too thin, its joints bent just a little too far the wrong way. Its arms hung too low. The snout was narrow and dripping. And the eyes, God, the eyes, yellow and pulsing like lanterns, locked on her through the glass. The worst part, it wasn't just standing. It was swaying, side to side, Like it was enjoying the show. Rufus went ballistic, barking and clawing at the door with such ferocity Jeanne was sure he'd break the glass. She screamed. Kyle came barreling into the kitchen in his boxers, baseball bat in hand, but by then the thing was gone. No rustle, no footsteps, no howl. Just the silent thicket and a shaking dog who wouldn't leave Jeanne's side for the rest of the night. They didn't sleep. They sat in the living room, every light on, watching the backyard like it might breathe. At dawn, they ventured outside. There were tracks in the grass. Long, clawed, bipedal. The gate was still latched. No signs of digging. Just a trail that led from the tree line to the porch and stopped. That day, Kyle bought motion lights, cameras, an aluminum bat he kept under the bed. They never caught it on film. Oh, the cameras triggered all right. Floodlights would flare. Up. Motion sensors would beep, but there was never anything there. No animals. No wind. Just that cold, thick silence and Rufus trembling in the hallway. Then came the howling. Low and deep and unnatural. Not a dog, not a coyote. Something pretending to be. Something that understood the shape of a howl but not the soul of it. The sound rose every night, closer and closer. By the second week, it came from just outside their fence. They didn't open the door anymore, didn't use the yard. They let Rufus pee on puppy pads in the garage, and then the growl came from inside. Jen heard it first, lying in bed. A sound in the attic. Rufus was with them, curled up between their feet, ears flat, whining. The growl was deeper than the dog's. It echoed through the walls like it lived there, like it had always been there, waiting. Kyle checked the attic with a flashlight and the bat. Found nothing but insulation and dust. But that night, they heard it again. And again. Until finally, Rufus snapped. It was early morning. The house was quiet. Jen was making coffee. Kyle was brushing his teeth. Rufus stood at the foot of the stairs, stiff and silent. Then, without a sound, he bolted, not up the stairs, but into the guest room. He lunged at the wall, scratched. It bloody, snarled, barked, bit into the drywall until his muzzle bled. When they pulled him back, panting and wild-eyed, there was a hole in the plaster. Behind it, tucked between studs and insulation, they found a bundle, old bones, wrapped in rotted canvas, and a tooth, long, curved, like a dog's, but bigger, blackened, hollow at the base, like it had been drained. They called the cops. Animal control. No one cared. They were told it was probably a stray. Maybe a coyote that died in the walls and left a scent. Maybe they'd imagined it all, but they moved out a week later. The house is empty now. Rufus never barked again. His growl died in his throat like something had taken it from him. He sits in silence now, always facing the back door, always watching. And if you pass 917 Beaver Run Lane just after dark, you might hear a howl that doesn't belong to any living thing, or catch a glimpse, just a flicker, of something. Tall and grinning, standing on two legs behind the trees. And if you do, don't look away. It doesn't like that. They buried Victoria on a Wednesday. Rain poured the whole morning, soaking the priest's words until they sounded like drowning. The casket was white, too small, with lily arranged on top in a pattern that reminded her mother, Evelyn, of wilted bone. No one spoke much at the cemetery. No one knew what to say when a child dies in her sleep. No fever, no sign of struggle, no choking, no trauma. Just a little girl gone cold sometime after midnight, as if the air had simply taken her back. The autopsy showed nothing. The doctor muttered something about apnea. The coroner wrote undetermined. Evelyn called it God's will for the sake of those around her, but in her chest, She felt something dark and wrong and unfinished. They didn't touch the nursery. Everyone said to. "You need to move on," her sister had whispered over lukewarm tea. "Let someone else pack it away for you," said her mother-in-law, already boxing up her grief like it was something that could be shelved. But Evelyn refused. The room stayed the same. Lavender walls, white curtains, tiny socks still folded. In the drawers, stuffed rabbits still sitting at the foot of the crib. The mobile, porcelain stars on brass strings, still turning gently in the breeze from a window that no longer opened. And the door, it never stayed closed. No matter how many times Evelyn pulled it shut, she'd find it cracked open the next morning. Just an inch. Enough to see the dark inside. Enough to remind her that something waited. The first time she heard the sound, it was 2 nights after the funeral. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, woke with a start. The TV was on static, humming low. The house was quiet, save for the gentle creak above her. A footstep. Tiny, deliberate. From the nursery, she froze. Darcy, her golden retriever, lifted his head from the floor but didn't bark. Just stared up toward the ceiling, ears pulled tight against his skull. Evelyn climbed the stairs slowly, the old wood groaning beneath her. At the top, she stopped. The nursery door was open wider now. The mobile was spinning. No breeze. She stepped in. Her breath caught. Smelled like powder, like talc and warm skin. And the crib. The blanket was crumpled in the center. As if someone had just climbed out. She backed out of the room, shut the door, and leaned her weight against it until the knob stopped rattling. She didn't tell anyone. What would she say? But the next day, she found small things moved. The tea set Victoria had gotten for her 3rd birthday. 1 cup was on the floor, filled with dust and a dead fly. A dress hung on the closet door. One Evelyn knew had been packed in a plastic bin weeks ago. And then came the humming. Soft at first, barely audible. But it was Victoria's lullaby. The same one Evelyn had sung since she was a baby. The same melody her daughter had started humming to herself while building pillow forts or brushing her doll's hair. Evelyn sat outside the nursery one night, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, and she listened. The mobile turned. The music box inside the wall-mounted bear played notes that hadn't worked in years. And underneath it all, a child's voice, barely above a breath. "Mama." She tried blessing the room. Tried candles. Tried a priest, a medium, an entire church group that held hands in a circle and prayed until their palms were slick with sweat. Nothing worked. The door still opened every night. The light still flickered at 2:17 a.m., and the child, her child, was still there. Sometimes in reflections, sometimes in dreams. Once, Evelyn saw her standing in the corner behind the curtain, just a sliver of her pale leg, just enough to make her scream, but never close, never fully visible. Victoria stayed in her room. Always, neighbors whispered, said Evelyn had lost her mind, said grief was a dangerous thing, said it wasn't good for a woman to live alone in a house filled with shadows. One night, the whispers stopped because the neighbor's boy, 6 years old, brown curls, missing teeth, wandered into Evelyn's yard during a game of tag. She wasn't home at the time, but when they found him, he was sitting in the middle of the nursery, cross-legged, laughing, talking to no one. When they asked who he'd been playing with, he smiled and said, "The girl in the white dress. She says her name's Victoria." They moved away 2 days later. The room got colder. No matter the season, no matter how high she turned the thermostat, the nursery stayed cold enough to fog glass. Evelyn kept the door shut with a chair against it, now a heavy one, wedged tight. But some nights she woke to the sound of creaking wood, then dragging, then the high-pitched squeal of the chair sliding away from the door on its own. And once, Only once she heard breathing, right behind her as she lay in bed. The cold breath of a child, not quite tall enough to reach the mattress. She didn't turn over. Couldn't. Just pulled the blanket up and whispered through tears, "I love you. But please, please let go." The next day, the crib was empty. The blanket folded neatly. A single tulip placed on the pillow, Victoria's favorite flower. The one they hadn't been able to find for the funeral. Evelyn doesn't try to shut the door anymore. She leaves it open. Just enough because sometimes when the nights are very still and the wind carries a scent of powder and sleep, she hears the mobile spinning and a soft tiny voice whispering, "I'm still here, Mama. I never left." The house was built in 1996, but the bones felt older. Dry, cracked, like something that had been waiting. Bethany and her husband Eric bought the place in La Vernia after his job transferred him from Dallas. A white 2-story colonial on a quiet stretch of Mesquite Drive. Tucked behind cotton fields and fence posts leaning like tired old men. Bethany didn't notice the staircase at first. Not in the way that mattered. It was just a staircase. Wooden, clean, simple. 10 steps from the tiled foyer to the second floor. Landing, where her art studio would be and the spare bedroom they never planned to fill. She counted the steps the day they moved in because she was the kind of person who liked knowing how things were supposed to be. 10. Just like on the blueprint. But then came the 11th. It happened the first week. Late at night, Eric had already fallen asleep, the kind of dead sleep men seem to collapse into after long drives and full dinners. Bethany had gone downstairs for a glass of water. The house creaked in its usual spots. The hum of the fridge, the far-off moan of wind down. The chimney familiar now. She padded back up the stairs barefoot, counting absently in her head like always. 1, 2, 3, 4. She felt calm. 5, 6, 7, 8. The light on the landing flickered, just for a moment. 9, 10. Her foot landed on something that wasn't there before. 11. She blinked, confused, then looked down. Nothing. Just the floor. The 10th step behind her. No dip, no groove, no extra board. But her foot had definitely landed on something else, higher than it should have been. Just for a second, she told herself it was fatigue, sleepwalking maybe. She didn't mention it to Eric. The next night, it happened again. Same steps. Same count. 10, 11. This time, her foot hovered mid-air, like there should have been a step there, and then click, it hit the floor with a jolt. She stumbled, caught herself on the railing. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She looked behind her. Still 10 steps. Bethany stopped going downstairs at night. Instead, she started leaving a water bottle on the knit stand and a flashlight just in case. But her brain betrayed her. Every night, she dreamed of stairs. Long ones, wooden and blackened. And endless. They twisted like vines, disappeared into ceilings that turned to sky, and she kept climbing. Always climbing. Always one more than there should be. One night, she woke to the sound of footsteps, not hers. She lay still, watching the hall light creep under the bedroom door. Soft, slow steps creaked upward. 11 of them, she counted. Whispered it in the dark. 10, 11. She didn't breathe for 30 seconds. Then the hall light flickered. Once, twice, went out. When Eric turned over, she nearly screamed. But he was warm, soft, real. She clung to his back until morning. Bethany called the contractor the next day. Had him send over the blueprints again. She spread them on the dining table, fingers tracing the lines. 10 steps. 10 steps exactly. No hidden crawl space. No secret landing. No design error. The man on the phone sounded bored. Some houses settle weird, he said. Might feel like more, but there ain't. But it wasn't a feeling anymore. The following Sunday, Bethany stood at the base of the staircase in the dark. Midnight. No sound but the wind through the eaves. She held her phone flashlight low, counted again. This time out loud. 1, 2, 3. Halfway up, her hand tightened on the railing. Her feet didn't hurt, but the wood was cold. 4, 5, 6, 7. She reached the 8th step and paused. The light dimmed. 8, 9. The air thickened. Like standing in a pool, chest deep. 10. She stopped. And then, the next one came. A board unfolded from the darkness, wide, glossy, darker than the others, wet. Her foot hovered above it, then landed. Her knee buckled. It felt like the stair moved, just enough to breathe. She scrambled up the landing and turned. The 11th step was gone. Just the 10th step below her, still, silent. Mocking. Monday morning, Bethany tore the carpet off the stairs. She hammered the wood. Nothing hollow. But when she got to the 10th step and pried the corner, she found something tucked beneath it, an old ribbon, faded blue, tied around a small rust-colored tooth. The next day, she found the message on the wall above the landing, faint and scrawled in something brown. One more step, then I'll be whole. Eric blamed her paints. Said she was sleepwalking again. That night, she slept on the couch. In the middle of the night, Eric woke screaming. He swore he fell through the floor. That something beneath the bedroom had pulled him down, clawed at his ankles. He showed her the scratches. They looked old. That was their last night in the house. Bethany packed what she could and left Lavernia. She doesn't live in a 2-story home anymore. Doesn't walk upstairs. Doesn't even like carpeted steps. Says she needs to see them. Bare. But she still dreams of wood rising under her feet. Still wakes up clutching her calves. And some mornings, when she stands in the hallway of her 1-story rental, she swears she can still feel a phantom board lifting under her foot. The 11th step, still waiting. They bought the house in August, during the kind of Texas heat that turned the pavement to syrup and made even the cicadas sound exhausted. Cedar Park wasn't far from Austin, but it had that slower, quieter feel that made you forget highways existed. The real estate listing was vague. Vintage charm. Needs TLC. Price to sell. To Chloe and Marcus Miller, it sounded like potential. Their first home. Their first shot at a fresh start after 2 brutal years in a 1-bedroom apartment with noisy neighbors and no central air. It was a 2-story fixer-upper with yellow siding and a sloped red roof. But the strange thing, the only thing they didn't like, was the ceiling fan in the upstairs hallway. It was old. Really old. Bronze blades, tarnished chain, dust so thick it looked like it grew there. The realtor had called it antique. Chloe had called it creepy. Marcus said, "We'll replace it first thing." But they didn't, because the electrician never showed twice, and the fan had a mind of its own. They tried to turn it off the first night. Chloe pulled the chain, and the fan stopped for exactly 3 seconds before it groaned and spun again, slowly, deliberately. Marcus flipped the wall switch off. The blade slowed. Then, when they walked away, they heard it whirring again, faintly at first. They returned to find it moving, faster than before. Marcus climbed a ladder, unscrewed the glass dome in the center, pulled the wires. Sparks flew. The fan stopped. They both laughed, nervous but relieved. That night, it started spinning again. No power. No switch. Just spinning. And this time, it didn't make a sound. By the 3rd day, the air upstairs felt different. Still. Charged. Chloe said the hallway felt tight, like something was pressing down on her shoulders. She swore the fan moved when she passed beneath it, a slight shift, a tilt, like it was watching. Marcus laughed it off. "It's just nerves," he said. "Old houses creak, old fans suck." That night, it spun so fast it shook the ceiling. Sound echoed down the stairwell like a low growl. They stood beneath it, looking up into the blur of blades. Then they heard it, faint and far off, a voice somewhere above the fan. "Help me." They called another electrician. This one came. An older man, silver hair and a wedding ring worn smooth. He stood beneath the fan for a long time before speaking. "You tried to stop it?" he asked. Chloe nodded. He sighed. "Don't." "What do you mean?" "I've seen this before," he said. "Not often, but once in Round Rock and once near Waco." He didn't touch the fan, just backed away and said, "Whatever's in there, it's not mechanical. Don't pull it down. Don't. Unplug it, and don't be under it when it stops." But it didn't stop. That night, the fan spun in reverse. Marcus dreamed of hands reaching down through the blades, long, gray arms stretching past the metal and into the room. He woke up gasping, skin cold, and found the upstairs light flickering. Fan was perfectly still. He reached for the chain. Chloe grabbed his wrist. "Don't. It's off." "It's not," she whispered. By the weekend, the hallway changed. Time bent there. Marcus walked through and came out 5 minutes later. Even though Chloe said he'd only been gone seconds, Chloe's phone wouldn't work near the fan. Batteries drained instantly. Their cat refused to go upstairs at all. Then the shadows started, first in the corner of their eyes, then in the mirror by the stairwell, then directly under the fan, a shape that didn't match the light, a twist of darkness that turned slowly as the blades moved. Marcus tried to film it. The footage was static. Only one frame showed anything. The fan, frozen mid-spin, with a face behind it, pale, hollow-eyed, mouth stretched too wide, pressed against the ceiling like it was waiting to come through. That night, the fan stopped again. And this time, the silence hurt, pressed into their skulls like static in their blood. They didn't move, didn't breathe. Then one slow click. The sound of the chain being pulled, but neither of them touched it. The fan began spinning faster, faster than it ever had, and from above came the sound of laughter. Marcus moved out, packed a bag and drove back to Houston. Said he'd had enough. Chloe stayed for a while, until one day she didn't answer her texts or her calls. When Marcus returned with police, the front door was locked. The house was quiet. The fan was gone. No fixture, no chain, just a scorched ring on the ceiling and a single message scratched into the wall beneath it, carved in deep, ragged gouges. SA turned IT off. They never found Chloe, but sometimes, late at night, neighbors swear they see lights flicker in the upstairs hallway, and a faint spinning sound even when the house is empty. The house on Fallow Bend was one of those too-good-to-be-true listings. Big yard, old wood floors, a creaky charm that made it feel lived in, but not in a bad way at first. Ellen and Marcus hadn't been looking for something with character. They just wanted a bigger place after the baby came. Then the baby turned into a toddler, and the toddler became Ava, with her odd little songs and fierce little stares, the kind that made grown men step out of her way in the supermarket. Fireplace had been a selling point. Red brick, the old kind, with iron grating that didn't quite close all the way. Ellen loved it. She imagined Christmas stockings, winter cocoa, crackling logs. They used it once. The second night after they moved in, the smoke backed up, filled the living room in a thick, gray film that smelled less like cedar and more like wet ash and something else, something sour. Marcus blamed the flu. Hired a chimney sweep who came out, poked around and said, "Huh." Marcus hated when people said, "Huh," during a home inspection. The man said the back wall of the chimney wasn't brick. It was wood, painted to look like brick. Old paint, too, flaking, lead heavy. Not a builder's mistake. More like a cover dash up. He suggested a structural inspection. Marcus waved it off. 2 days later, Ava found the door. She was 3.5, with big eyes and a habit of talking to herself. One morning, Ellen found her kneeling in front of the cold fireplace, her tiny fingers tracing the grate. She was whispering to it. "What are you doing, baby?" "I'm asking it to open," Ava said, without looking away. "The talking place is waiting." Ellen paused. "Who told you that?" Ava smiled, small and strange. They did. That night, Marcus checked it himself. The brick was painted plywood, thin, with a seam running down the center that matched the width of a narrow door. Hinged on one side, covered in soot and nail holes. He pried it open. Behind the fireplace was a small, windowless room. Dust-choked, lined with slats of old wood, floor to ceiling. No insulation. No light fixtures. Just a wooden child-sized chair in the middle, and a pile of small bones in the corner. Animal, he told himself. Probably animal. He didn't tell Ellen, just sealed it back up and nailed the plywood tight. Then he told Ava never to go near the fireplace again. That night, Ava sleepwalked for the first time. They found her curled up inside the fireplace, hands pressed against the fake brick, eyes wide open. She was mouthing something, but there was no sound. After that, it got worse. The house creaked even when the wind was dead still. Ellen heard voices in the static between baby monitor clicks. Marcus found nails on the floor near the fireplace, old square-headed ones like they used in the 1800s, still warm to the touch, even though they came from inside a sealed wall. Ava started calling the room by name, the talking place. "They live there," she whispered to her mother. "They said they used to be children too, but they stayed too long. Now their mouths are full of dust and nails." Ellen cried the first time Ava said that. Marcus finally tore the wall down for good. The hidden room was gone, not empty, gone. No space, no cavity. The chimney ran straight back into the house's foundation. No room could have existed there. No space for it to exist in. He pulled up the inspection records. The blueprints. They showed nothing. The fireplace was ornamental, built over solid brick. So what had they seen? What had they opened? The night before they moved out, Ava vanished for 3 hours. They found her inside the wall behind the fireplace, but the wall was solid again. No opening. No door. Her arm was sticking out of the brick like it had melted through. Cold. Dusty. They broke the wall apart with a sledgehammer. Inside, Ava, asleep. Smiling. And beside her, the chair, now newer, closer to her size. They left that night. Burned the house down. It never made the news, but neighbors say, sometimes, if you walk past the empty lot on a cold night, you'll hear a child laughing through the ashes, not playing, not happy. Just talking to someone you can't see. And if you get too close, you'll find yourself whispering back. Deer Hollow Estates was the kind of neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened, at least not on paper. Crime rate 0. Lawn violations strictly enforced. Every Tuesday, the bins lined the curb like obedient soldiers, and the hedges looked clipped by the same invisible hand. Kids rode scooters in tidy loops, and wind chimes sang sweetly on front porches. On the surface, it was a master-planned community soaked in beige. But what the brochures didn't say, what the smiling realtors never mentioned, was what happened after midnight. It always started with a scream. A long, rasping thing, not quite human, not quite animal, dragged up from someplace people weren't meant to hear. It didn't come every night, But when it did, you knew. The air changed. Still and heavy, like the trees were holding their breath. You could almost feel it in the walls. New families made the mistake of calling the police. They'd dial 911 at 12:03 a.m., voices shaky, eyes darting toward the blinds. But nothing ever came of it. The squad cars didn't show. No lights, no sirens. And by morning, the dispatcher would swear no call was ever made. The truth was, the HOA didn't want trouble. The HOA didn't like attention. When Kyle and Lindsay Warner moved into Lot 48 on Coyote Trail, they were like every other couple. Fresh paint smell in their nostrils, folding boxes stacked like optimism in every room. They waved to neighbors, hung a wreath on the door, smiled during orientation. With Cheryl from the HOA board, who handed them the bylaws like they were scripture. No decorative flags outside national holidays. No exterior paint outside the approved palette. No solar lights. No wind chimes after dusk, and no screaming after midnight. Lindsay blinked. "I'm sorry?" "No screaming," Cheryl repeated, teeth perfectly white. "It disturbs the neighborhood." "Harmony," Kyle laughed. "That's a joke, right?" Cheryl did not laugh. The first week, everything seemed normal. Kyle grilled steaks on Sunday. Lindsay met a woman named Pam who offered zucchini bread and a blank stare. The houses were close, together, but no one looked too hard at you. No one asked questions. Then came the third night. At 12:04 a.m. The scream tore through the street like a jagged blade, high and wet and wrong, like a woman and something else inside her were being peeled apart. Lindsay sat bolt upright. Kyle hit the floor running, thinking maybe someone was being murdered. But outside, the neighborhood was quiet. Still. Every porch light off, every curtain drawn. Even the crickets had shut up. They asked around the next day. Neighbors offered vague smiles, a couple of shrugs. Pam just said, "You get used to it." That night, Kyle stayed up with a bat. Lindsay kept a steak knife on the knitstand. The scream came again, not the same sound, but something deeper this time, lower, something that rattled the windows, even though there was no wind. Something that sounded like it came from the house next door, except that house had been vacant since foreclosure 6 years ago. They tried to leave the following day. Packed bags. Called an agent. Cheryl showed up at their door within the hour. "Leaving already?" she asked sweetly, eyes not blinking enough. "Such a shame. You haven't even made it to the first community dinner." "There's something wrong here," Kyle said. "That house next door? They're screaming." Cheryl smiled wider. "Yes, and you've been reporting it. That's a violation." What?" She tapped the bylaw book. Page 12, paragraph 3. Residents are not to call emergency services during noise events occurring between 12 o'clock and 3 am. It's disruptive. Frightens the children. Noise events? Lindsay choked. "You mean screaming?" Cheryl tilted her head. "It's how the neighborhood stays balanced. Everyone listens. Everyone observes. But no one interferes. That's how it's always been." Kyle slammed the door. That night, the scream came again, but closer. Lindsay swore she saw something move in the backyard, something tall, naked, hunched, with limbs that bent like sticks in a fire. It didn't roar. It didn't howl. It cried. And in the house behind them, a porch light flicked on, not in alarm, but in acknowledgement. As though it were signaling something. The next morning, their welcome mat was gone, replaced by a note, written in perfect script. Final warning. Disturbances after midnight will not be tolerated. Lindsay wanted to run. Kyle called his brother in Dallas. But the car wouldn't start. I said the battery was fine. The tow truck never came. The locksmith they called to change the deadbolt never showed. They were in now. The next night, it Wasn't a screen dot, it was a voice, right outside the window. A whisper threaded through broken glass and fogged breath. Lindsay heard her name, not yelled, not spoken, exhaled, as if something behind the drywall had a throat full of dust and a mouth full of their memories. And still, no one came. But the neighbors, oh, they listened. You could feel them, sitting. In the dark, heads tilted just slightly toward the sound. Not curious, not afraid, just attentive. Pam waved at them the next morning. "Hope you're settling in," she said, smiling too wide. "Don't worry. First few weeks are the worst. After that, it learns your scent." It, not they. Not her. That night, Kyle bolted. The doors, nailed windows shut, kept the lights on. But Lindsay heard the growling in the vent, and the crawl space, and the walls. It never tried to get in, because it was already inside. Now, the Warner house is quiet. No screaming, just the occasional thud at 2:17 a.m., and the porch light flicking on and off like a heartbeat. Kyle doesn't go outside anymore. Lindsay sometimes stands at the window, her hand pressed against the glass, mouthing things no one can hear. The HOA says everything's fine, and the neighbors? They still don't report the screams. They just listen. Because one day, soon, it'll be their turn again. The land was cheap. That's what everyone told the Hendersons when they bought the property on Whispering Pines Road, just outside Cedar Creek, Texas. It was a modest plot, 4 acres framed by towering oak and mesquite, far enough from the highway to keep the noise out but close enough to town for convenience. A blank slate, perfect for the dream home they'd spent years saving for. What the realtor didn't mention was that the parcel had a history, a dark history. A storm had ripped through the area 15 years earlier, a lightning bolt so fierce it split a giant oak right down the middle. The tree didn't just fall, it exploded. The fire burned for hours, scorching the earth and leaving a patch of soil blackened and lifeless. The locals called it the Ashen Hollow. The Hendersons, eager and optimistic, shrugged off the stories as superstition. They cleared the land, laid foundations, and built a sprawling 2-story house with modern appliances and wide windows that caught every sunset. But beneath the hardwood floors and fresh paint, the ash still lay buried, a silent witness. From the first week, strange things happened. The air inside the house felt heavy, like it was charged with unseen electricity. At night, lights flickered. Without warning, outlets sparked softly when no appliances were plugged in. The thermostat would plummet to freezing temperatures, then climb scorching hot within minutes, as if the house breathed its own chaotic weather. One evening, Rachel Henderson was cooking dinner when the kitchen lights buzzed violently. A flash leapt from the toaster socket, casting eerie shadows across the tiled floor. She yelped, unplugged the toaster, and glanced out the window. A sudden storm was rolling in, lightning flashing in distant clouds. Later that night, as rain hammered the roof, the power went out. The whole house plunged into darkness except for a faint glow coming from the basement. Curious and uneasy, Rachel grabbed a flashlight and crept down the creaking stairs. The beam landed on the circuit breaker box, where a strange pulsating light throbbed beneath the panel. Sparks danced behind the metal cover, but there was no cause for it. No loose wires. No signs of water damage. When she touched the box, a sharp jolt shot through her fingers, and the lights exploded in a cascade of white noise and static that echoed through the walls. She stumbled back upstairs, heart pounding. Over the next weeks, the disturbances grew worse. Electrical devices switched on by themselves, playing distorted music or static-filled voices. The house seemed to hum with an ancient energy, vibrating faintly beneath the skin. Rachel and her husband Tom, started hearing whispers, indecipherable but urgent, coming from the walls, the floors, even the air vents. Tom, a skeptic by nature, chalked it up to faulty wiring and stress, until the night the lightning came. Again, a violent storm tore across the sky, striking near the property. The house shuddered under the blast. In the sudden blackout, Rachel saw shadows flicker across the walls, not her own, but twisted and warped, like smoke caught in a draft. When power returned, they found scorch marks not on the roof or siding, but deep in the basement floor, charred black in a perfect circle, like a brand. Tom called an electrician who examined the house thoroughly but found nothing wrong. The circuits tested clean, the grounding was sound, yet the sparks kept coming. Outlets flared with blue fire when no one was near. Lights blinked in patterns, almost like Morse code. One night, Rachel dreamed of the earth beneath their feet, ash swirling in a dark void, shapes twisting in the smoke. A voice, old as time, whispered warnings in a language she almost understood. The next morning, they discovered something buried in the garden, fragments of blackened wood, faintly glowing with heat despite the cold soil. Tom tried to dig deeper, but the earth resisted, almost alive. His shovel struck hard metal beneath the ash. They unearthed a rusted, twisted relic, a metal box, sealed shut, etched with symbols neither of them recognized. That night, the house roared with electricity. The outlet sparked so fiercely that the breakers blew, plunging them into darkness once more. And in the silence that followed, Rachel heard it clearly, a low, crackling voice, speaking from beneath the floorboards. From the ash itself, they left Whispering Pines Road soon after. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind is right and the sky is fractured with lightning, the neighbors say the old house still hums. And if you stand close enough to the outlets, you might feel a spark leap from nowhere, a warning, because some ground never forgets the fire that burned it, and some houses never forget where the lightning struck.